had known Swami, been through the Bal Vikas. For me, Swami was everything. Swami replaced every other, it was Swami and me. That was what it was. So what happened, the Shankaracharya of Kanchi was there. And my parents actually asked me, why don't you also join along? Why don't you come along? And unfortunately, my parents are seated here. I told them I do not want to join. I do not want to come and see the Shankaracharya. Fundamentally, the reason was that I had already known Swami. I don't think there is a need for me to go to another guru. So that was the thought that I had in my mind. A 10-year-old boy. It was just a pure thought. But it so happened that the Shankaracharya, after his visit to the temple, he had come further down the road, much closer to my home, to another place. Now this was a 2-minute walk from my house. So he had come further down. So my parents had already gone to the temple, and then my father runs back and he tells me that, okay, you didn't want to come to the temple. Your mother is feeling extremely upset that you did not come to the temple. He's just come further down. Why don't you come take his darshan? And I, for no other reason other than the fact that I did not want to upset my parents, I went to the lawns of that place where the Shankaracharya was visiting. And there were a few thoughts running in my mind on that day, and I very vividly remember it. The thought was running as to, there is no comparison between pontiffs and Swami and all that. But somewhere, as I said, a 10-year-old boy, it was just a pure thought, an absolute innocent thought in my head as to, now that Swami is here. And I saw most of them standing there, and they were all waiting for the Shankaracharya to arrive. And they were all wanting to see him and all that. Somehow in my head, the thought was, now that Swami is here, why don't you redirect everybody there? Why a D route? Was a thought I had in my head. Now the Shankaracharya came, and there was a large crowd in front of me, and he alighted from his van. He was going inside for the puja. As he was going past me, he was in a straight line from me, and he suddenly stopped. I suddenly stopped, and he asked people to move. And he just came straight down to me, and he asked me, what is your name? Per enna? Abdin ketar. I was totally taken aback. Here is a guy who first of all refused to actually come. And after going there, I was having these kind of thoughts as to, Swami da vanduttare apra yen abdingara thoughts was in my head. And he suddenly came and asked, what is your name? I took it as a blessing. I said, my name is Rajesh. He just blessed with his hands. He turned back, walked, went off inside. It was a very, very brief conversation, but it sort of left a huge impact on me for the energies that the Shankaracharya himself is. He went in, and there was a puja that happened inside, and the people there in that house, they had respected him in many ways. One of the ways they had respected him was, they gave, when he walked out, I saw on him a garland of lemons, and I saw on him a krita of flowers. He walked out. When I saw that, my thoughts became even more powerful as to, is this required? Or I was thinking as to, now this much time, if probably somebody would have put into looking at Swami himself, wouldn't have been better. These were the thoughts running in my head. He came out, again he came past straight line, the crowd had come back. Once again he asked people to move. He just walked straight to me, no word spoken. Not a single word was spoken. He just walked straight to me, and he bent his head, he removed that garland, he put it on my head, and he removed the krita, put it on my head. He removed the garland, he put it on me, and he just quietly walked away. Okay, this was in 90s. It so happened that I had an opportunity where, in the year 2000, I was in the interview room with Swami, and I was alone with him. And Swami was sitting in his chair reading letters. So the letters that had been collected. Now, one thing I learned after going a little close to Swami, looking at the letters, is how much I have bombarded with those letters. How many letters come? And he sits there so patiently reading every one of them, everyone opening it, putting it. Every one of them opening it, putting it. So neat. The paper wouldn't even get crushed, wouldn't even get crumpled. The way it would have been received, the same way opened, same way closed, same way discarded. So I was sitting there, and somewhere during those moments, it's absolute silence. Swami isn't talking anything. And you sort of need to muster some courage to start a conversation, because Swami is actually in a very different plane. He is reading through letters. He would talk to himself. He would, suddenly gaze up in the air, and all that will be going on. Now, how do I start a conversation? I was just sitting down at his feet, and I was pressing his feet. As he was discarding every letter, I would take the letter and, keep it aside, so that after that the letter needs to be taken care of. So it looked like this thing was coming to an end. Then I slowly started a conversation. I said, Swami, can I share with you something that happened a few years back? Until then, that disconnected Swami suddenly became so interested in what I'm going to say. He said, Chappu. I am here only for that. Tell me what. And he came to the edge of his seat. Until then he was sitting behind. He came to the edge of his seat and tell me. He put aside everything and he said, come on, tell me. So I said, Swami, so many years back this happened. I narrated this incident, and you can imagine, I was putting in the best of my narration because Swami was showing so much interest. Swami wanted to know what happened. So I said, Swami, this happened. He came. I said, I will not go. Then my father came, and father said, no, at least for mother's sake, you should come. I went there. All this was going on, and Swami was like, really? Inka hai me? Then what happened? He was constantly encouraging me to tell what next. And I was in my dramatic best maybe on that day. I was putting in the best of my narrative skills to explain, build a suspense, all that was going on. And then I narrated until a point where the Shankaracharya came out with the Krita and the Mala. Until that point I narrated. Until that point I said, Swami, this happened. Swami was like, oh really, nice, oh really, then next. Then all of a sudden, there was an absolutely different Swami that I saw. All of a sudden, that inquisitive, the childlike, innocent, wanting to know more kind of a Swami suddenly disappeared. He sat back on the chair like a king. All I can relate to is he sat back on the chair like one Raja of Rajas. That body language changed. The eyes changed. The entire facial expressions changed. And he stopped me from narrating. And he said, instead of me narrating the rest of the story, he narrated what happened after that. He said, the Shankaracharya came. The Shankaracharya was going past you. The Shankaracharya caught your thought. He came close to you. He removed his garland, put it on you. He removed his Krita, put it on you, and he walked away. It was such a big moment of truth for me that day. It was such a big moment of truth for me that day that for a second I had absolutely forgotten that here is a person who actually has seen it all. And I was trying to tell him what was going on, but he knew exactly what had happened. And he narrated this to me, and I was awestruck. I had nothing to say after that. It is that moment where you are dropped from the, you take to the highest floor, and from there you are dropped, you just come crashing down and realize that, oh my goodness, what was I doing all this time, right? So that happened, and I wasn't telling this incident. Swami had indicated not to share this incident for some time. Every time I would ask Swami, can I, whenever I was asked to speak, I would request Swami if I could say this. He would say a no. I had totally given up after a point to ask Swami on this because I felt, maybe these are conversations that happen between the greats, the Mahans, and the people who absolutely interact at different levels, right? So I sort of stopped asking, and one fine day in Trai Brindavan, and Swami wanted me to speak. When I went close to him, then he said, "Hey, Saraswati Cheppu," abhinnaru. And that was the first day I took Swami's permission to start sharing this. Because to me, in my personal experience, this has been an acknowledgement at various levels. This has been he doesn't need any acknowledgement, but still this has been something which has been a fact that you just know that here is a person who has walked this earth, who converses, who is probably everybody converges into, right? And then this beautiful time that he has given